how can I still get a really good workout and fit it into my schedule?
If you're having trouble sticking to a new habit, try a smaller version until it becomes automatic. If you do 3 workouts a week and you say you're gonna do 3 workouts a week and then you show up and do your 3 workouts, how do you feel? Great. Like you feel like you said you were going to do something and you did it, and that's actually your identity confirming that, right, and cementing that in.
It's not about how long you're working out, it's about how long you can sustain this, and it's all about longevity.
There's no end date to taking care of yourself.
Right. What are you chasing here? Like, what's the end goal?
The heaviest weight a client will ever lift is the front door the first time they come in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Scale podcast. I'm your host, Katherine, and we have a very special episode for you guys. So are you ready to learn why our boot camp workouts are the way they are and who is behind the awesome programming that we have at boot camp? Well, you are in for a treat. So today we have George, who is the integrator and facility leader at Berkeley Fit Body Boot Camp, who's been there for the last 6.5 years. And he is also the franchise business coach for Fit Body Boot Camp, the headquarters team. And then we also have Barrett, who is the owner of Berkeley Fit Body Boot Camp, and he's been an owner for just shy of a decade. And he's also the executive director of coaching for Fit Body at HQ. And these two guys are going to talk to us all about the programming, why our workouts are the way they are, why some days might be a little harder than others, why some days are more focused on strength and other days are more metabolic conditioning, all the questions behind it. You are going to get your answer today. So welcome Barrett and George to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having us, MK. Like, absolutely love it. Love what we do, and just a privilege to be here to talk about it and kind of like, you know, allow people to kind of peek behind the hood or behind the curtain and see you know, what we do to make the experience, not just the workout, but the experience as good as it is. So
yeah,
thank you.
Definitely. Well, before we get into that, I would love for you to share for our listeners who might be new to the podcast or do not know either one of you on a personal level, how you got into the fitness industry and how you found Fit Body Boot Camp. So I'll start with you, Barrett.
Interesting story. So, you know, fortunately, growing up, like, sports was very instrumental in my life. And I was fortunate to play not only in high school, but in college, which taught me a lot of accountability, a lot of structure, a lot of self-discipline, things like that. And, man, it was just incredible to have guidance and have that, you know, team aspect. So that's really where a lot of my passion for exercise science comes from. Now, fast forward, you get into the working world, you get into the real world, and fitness was not my first career. But fitness, you know, when I was traveling around, you know, I was working as a consultant for a utility contractor, you know, you're on projects all these different places. And for me, fitness was the one thing that kept me regular, because I'd be living out of a hotel here or there or wherever, you know, we ended up being. But after the day, I mean, you would see a lot of the guys, they'd be like, oh, let's go out to dinner and relax and this and that. And that could turn into a slippery slope really, really quickly when you're not, you know, taking care of your health and wellness. That can turn real quick. So I fell in love with fitness again, and that kept me, you know, kind of normal for about, you know, 8 years. And fortunately, I took a sabbatical after that. One of the things I really wanted to do was learn Spanish fluently. It was a goal of mine, and in college, being a 2-sport athlete, you know, part of, you know, becoming a major, getting a major in Spanish, it was you have to study abroad. And me being the inexperienced college kid was like, well, I can't do it during the school year because, you know, I got football in the fall, I got baseball in the spring. There's no way I can do that. Coach won't let me do it. And our coaches were like, hey, you know, you can just do it in the other season. And of course, I couldn't give up summer, right? So, you know, fast forward, I got to that point and I needed to make a life change for me, and went down to Central America to study Spanish. And what I ended up finding in that journey, and after a couple of meetings and met actually with Bryce, my brother, he convinced me to open a Fit Body Boot Camp in Central America while we were down there. And that story can go way further down that, but that's the Cliff's Notes version. Yeah. And, you know, when I made that decision to start in, I actually didn't realize, you know, how fulfilling it would be. And I think that strip it away and take a step back of like everything that we've done, it has been one of the most fulfilling things to help people within the health, wellness, and fitness realm, because fitness is tough. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it's tough. And the reason why it's tough is because you're intentionally doing hard things, resistance training or running and sprinting or whatever you're doing. It's challenging. And human beings, we are like electricity. We choose the path of least resistance. And I just have felt unbelievable fulfillment, from that. Personally, when I was living all around, that was the structure that kept me going, and I had that personal fulfillment. And to share that gift with others, it's been, fills my cup immensely.
Yeah.
So I have to thank my brother for being a little persuasive. I have to thank, some mentors in my life that told me to get outside my comfort zone, go down to Central America, because quite honestly, I don't know if I would have opened a Fit Body Boot Camp unless I was living in Central America. And the reason that it was, I had a friend down there who, he was trying to learn English, I was trying to learn Spanish, so we spent a lot of time together. And this guy, Francisco, was the happiest guy. I was jealous of him. He was the happiest guy, and he was living, in a small house with his entire family, and he was making $350 a month US.
Wow.
And he told me, he's like, man, I just want to learn English, because if I do that, I can make $600 a month US. And that would be awesome. And I can no longer work the graveyard shift because I can't speak English. And in that moment, it was like my eyes were opened. And I was like, I need to be doing something that fulfills me. And just so happened to come along, Bryce, this, that, and the right opportunity. And that was introduced to me. And sometimes the door of opportunity knocks really, really softly, and you got to listen. And fortunately, I was in that point where I was listening, and I was listening intently, and decided to make that leap, and haven't looked back today in my life. Best decision I made.
That's incredible, because I know you and I know all of the amazing work you've done with like Fit Body as an entire brand, but the fact that your passion, it all still stems back to helping other people is so beautiful. And with all the Fit Body owners, that's just at the core of what we all love, is just helping other people. And the more we serve, the more fulfilled we feel.
100%. It is the greatest feeling. And I've said this, like, to me, I want to help people who want to help themselves.
Right.
And that's what our community is really about. Like, you get in, and oftentimes in the workouts, you see people who, just very intimidated to come in. Coming into a gym can be very intimidating. And I remind our teams all the time, the heaviest weight a client will ever lift is the front door the first time they come in. And to be able to then make that weight feel weightless, because they can come in, because you've created this environment that really helps people be their best version of themselves.
Right.
Because guess what? Fitness is just the tip. It catapults into every other aspect of their life. And that's why that community and the service that we do as a brand is just very, very special to me. I love that.
Definitely. All right, so you open Berkeley Fit Body Boot Camp, and then you meet George, and then George comes in. George, how did you find Fit Body? How did this all happen for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here, and Barrett as well. But so I would say, 2.5 years after Barrett opened, so about 2.5 years in is when I made my appearance. Take a step back, rewind. My background was also like Barrett in sports. So grew up playing sports and stuff in high school. Was super interested in the human body though, human movement, how this whole thing works. And started programming workouts for myself and for even teammates, and doing a little personal training and stuff in high school. I would be, training my vertical jump, thinking I was going to be able to dunk a basketball and stuff when I was 15 and stuff like that. So that was where my foundation started. It took an interesting little turn as well. I got into dance, really pretty intensely, ballet specifically, which is interesting because it's the same thing. It's very the human body and movement, and then taking that movement and also making it beautiful, which is an interesting twist into the art side of it. But anyway, very similar, and they're athletes as well. So anyway, this is everything piling on to start, and then it comes to college, and I have to decide what I want to do. And again, I knew I wanted to help people. I knew it had to be something where I wanted, if someone needed someone, I wanted to be the someone that would help them, right? So I was thinking fireman, I was thinking nurse, I was literally just going down the line. but then always with that like sport and like that human body kind of like thing that I wanted to connect with. So kinesiology, of course, exercise and sports science. I went and got my degree, and it was my senior year, so I was then getting ready to graduate, and I needed an internship. And so, long story short, found FitBody through an intern posting, reached out to Barrett, connected with Barrett, started an internship, and continued to work, came on full time, and that was six and a half years ago. And so now, nothing really has changed, although everything has changed. I still love helping people. I still love programming. I still love the human body. And now I'm just kind of doing it in a way that I didn't think I would, but it's really awesome, really fulfilling. And now it's just like exponentially impactful as we get to program for more people and educate more people and help more people and even more coaches with the programming and the workout of the day and really the FitBody entire experience. So that's what I got.
So for the listeners, George and Barrett, they actually are the ones behind our workouts. So if you have any beef with any of the workouts, these are the two guys to go after. But before we get into that, I want you to educate our listeners on why FitBody Bootcamp as a brand focuses on, first off, just 30 minutes. Why the 30 minutes? Why not 45? Why not an hour? And then also, why HIIT style workouts? What's the benefit of that for someone who may be completely new to FitBody?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, sure. So the 30 minutes, and this is a little bit my opinion, so I don't know if Barrett has a different answer.
His take.
But there's no like magic number that like 30 minutes is like the number that you need. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want it to be long enough that you get a decent workout in and have enough time to do some certain things in that time, right? But there's no like, 30 minutes is like, if you hit 30, that's magic. Right. It's not that at all. It's just literally, we're looking at, can people consistently do the workout? Mm-hmm. And so it's a habit, right? And if they do the workout, they will be successful. If they don't, they won't, or they won't have as much chance to be successful. So we're literally just trying to create a program that people will consistently do. Mm-hmm. So I did prep a quote here from James Clear, who I think is like probably the father of habits and habit building and habit science. And he said, if you're having trouble sticking to a new habit, try a smaller version until it becomes automatic. Do less than you're capable of, but do it more consistently than you have before. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for us, when we say 30 minutes, it's 3 to 5 workouts a week, but like anyone can do that. You can do it for 30 minutes. And what we've seen is that if you say, hey, you have to work out for an hour, then you might be like, okay, well, I can do that like once or twice a week, right, or maybe never. But the number one excuse that people always have, or the number one reason when they say I can't work out, is I don't have time. And even people who do work out and are successful, then they eventually fall off. The reason they fell off is probably because they got busy, they had kids, or the kids' sports season came up, or whatever, they got a new job, right? And then it's time again. So if we can eliminate that, it's not a magic like, 30 minutes and you'll burn 1,000 million calories. It's not that at all. It's just 30 minutes is long enough to get a great workout, but short enough, you can literally schedule that in your calendar and you can do it. So the reason it's 30 minutes is so that you can actually do it. And that's like the truth. I don't know, Barrett, if you have anything else. But.
No, nail on the head. And that's always the biggest objection that anybody ever has in fitness is I don't have time. Mm-hmm. And just our society now, we live in the occupied or busy state. Right. You know, I got to go here. And the majority of our clients are parents. Mm-hmm. And when you're a parent, like, your kids rule the house. Mm-hmm. And we understand that things can change really quickly. And for us, like, we know that 30 minutes, you can sneak that in a couple times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. And that's the goal. That's the sweet spot, really. But it's, can you do that consistently? Because, oftentimes when people think, I need and we get this a lot, well, it's not an hour, you need an hour.
Right.
And I'm like, if you do it right, 30 minutes is all you need. Mm-hmm. And that's why, hey, once we've kind of set the framework of 30 minutes, which is, manageable from a calendar standpoint, now it comes down to how do we then program the exercise science to give that result? Because I would argue most people, when they go to the gym for the hour, they're probably taking a little bit
Right.
of extra time.
They're going from one machine to the next with no program.
Meandering, you
Yeah.
know, and hey, that's okay. That's why we're here. We love this stuff, and we want to help make sure that we are maximizing your time so that you're only spending 2% of your day with us. Now, I want you to live thinking about us for the other 98%, and that's why when we program stuff, it's not just about exercise science. We'll also program peaks in that workout because we want to make sure that workout is fun. Because, when you look at it, everyone's expectation for a workout is, I want to be, sweaty. I want to get a good work. I want to feel the muscle burn. I want my heart rate going. I want to be sucking air a little bit, this and that. But at the same time, that's the base expectation. That's where, I want to make it magical. So when we go through, it's not just about the expectation. It's how do we then take it one step up to make it a magical workout, to have a peak in there that people feel accomplished and those sorts of things. And for us, doing it in 30 minutes is totally feasible, and that's why we're so bullish on that. That time commitment allows you, it unlocks the door for your own investment in health, wellness, and fitness.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned, George, consistency compounds. And for me, when I'm talking to our clients, I'm like, it's not about how long you're working out, it's about how long you can sustain this, and it's all about longevity. And that's why I fell in love with boot camp 8 years ago, was because I was so busy. As you mentioned, we're living in a world where everyone's busy being busy. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, how can I still get a really good workout and fit it into my schedule? And I found that FitBody, it was only 30 minutes, so I could do it 4 or 5 days a week, and I could show up every day and be like, all right, it's only 30 minutes. I can do this. I got this. Totally. And so with that, you're programming the workouts. You have somebody that's completely new to fitness. They're signing up for their first 6-week trial, okay? Talk to us about how you even started going about how we're going to program this for that. We like to call it our Mrs. Jones. How are you going to program this for somebody new that's coming into the gym?
Oh, it's such a brilliant question because it is challenging. It's not, we are personal training in a group setting. So and that's what makes, boot camp affordable, because if you're trying to go to a personal trainer, you spend $100 an hour to do that. And that just eliminates, it's not feasible in the budget for the average American. So for us, we're trying to not only give that first day experience to kind of assess that individual, understand where they're at, their mobility, what modalities they can really perform very well, and we have to do it very quickly. And one of the first things that I'll kind of just say to start out, I'll let George color in some details too, but the first day that somebody comes in, and we will remind the client, 50% exertion, 50%, because this is going to happen quick. It's going to happen so fast. And for a client who maybe not be super conditioned or have a level of, hey, I'm used to being active, your blood sugar can drop very quickly, which makes you feel lightheaded, dizzy, those sorts of things. So our first thing is always safety, number one, that we're going to program stuff beyond. But we don't have the ability to say, hey, it's everybody's first day, so now we're going to slowly ramp it up. So that's part of where the art of coaching would really come into. We're still going to program the workout on our 4-week cycle, which we'll get into in a little bit. But it's also coaching at that point. Hey, this first week, I want you to have a gas to clutch relationship. You can't just hammer the gas because you're going to redline, You got to kind of pull back, relax, and then get back to it. And over that first, week to 2 weeks, not only are you going to be a little sore, it happens, we're going to find muscles that you haven't necessarily worked in a while, but you're going to start to build conditioning, specifically in the lungs. That's a big first step because that'll help your breathing pattern, which when you're working out, your body needs oxygen, oxygenated red blood cells to get to the muscles to make sure that you have endurance. And it takes time to develop that habit while you're starting out. So that's our first focus on a client walking in the doors, making sure that we set that person up for success in a group setting, so that essentially it doesn't matter what day they start and any day of the week, we can still tailor the experience for them so that they gradually get into the rhythm of our 4-week cycle right away. There's a little bit of a step ladder there, but that's really what it comes down, the art of coaching. But to get a little more granular on our 4-week mesocycle, and I say that it sounds a little bit fancy, but essentially it's just a cycle of workouts. And in exercise science, there's periodization. Just like you say, you can't redline the whole time, even when you're starting. you can't redline over and over. You can't always be having a max lift over and over and over because your body actually needs to recover. So it's very important in our planning in those 4 weeks, that cycle that alternates, that we program recovery. And one thing I'll say before we even dive into that is, we like to think about 4 quadrants of the body. Upper push, so you're thinking movements that like push-ups and things like that. Upper pull, things where you're pulling towards you, right? Lower push, thinking like squats, and lower pull, hinges. So we want to make sure that if you're hitting an upper push today, you're not going to hit an upper push tomorrow because your upper push muscles, they need to rest, they need to recover, and part of that recovery is actually burning and building your metabolism. So, we try to alternate that and we program that out so we're not having multiple consecutive days. And that's how we program for somebody who does want to come every day, although we don't recommend that, you know. And that's a really big thing for us, and that little step ladder approach. And George, I'll turn it over to you so you can get in the nitty gritty of not only the classic strength and Metcon of the weeks, but also the classic strength and Metcon days. Because just because we have a Metcon week, it doesn't mean every workout is going to be a Metcon. It's the same. We're going to mix it in. We're going to sprinkle other things in for that recoverability that we want to ensure that all of our clients are getting. So George, let's get in the weeds, man.
All right, cool. Actually, I want to hit something really quick because I feel it's come up a couple times, which is how many times you work out each week. And so we're open 6 days a week for the most part. So 6 would be obviously the maximum recommended. If you do come every day, and like Barrett said, the programming does work, so you are getting some rest. There's certain muscle patterns or muscles and movement patterns every other day and things like that. So you can come up to 6 days a week, but also go back to what we first talked about, which is the habit science and what we're actually trying to do. Just start small and make it easy. And you do need to see some progress for motivation. So I would say you should start with 3 times a week. And that's what we always talk about, right? The foundational habit workout 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And then it's just that. So if people are like, well, what should I do more if I want to get more, or if I want to see faster results? Should I work out more? Do multiple workouts, right? So let's go back to the habits. So if you do 3 workouts a week and you say you're going to do 3 workouts a week and then you show up and do your 3 workouts, how do you feel? Great. Like you feel like you said you were going to do something and you did it. And that's actually your identity and your like fitness life.
Right.
Like confirming that, right? And cementing that in. But then as soon as you start saying like, hey, I'm going to work out every day this week, and then you miss a day, you're going to be like, like this week was a failure. Like I'm not good enough. I didn't work out hard enough. Now if the scale doesn't move or you don't see progress, you're going to start blaming yourself and being like, I need to work out on Sunday and go run 10 miles. No, like that's not it, right? So start with, hey, I'm going to do 3 workouts. And then if you do 4 workouts, you're like, this is sweet. I got a bonus. Like, let's go. I'm an overachiever, right? And that really cements and sets you up for success in terms of like the mindset and the identity and the habits we're trying to build. So anyway, I want to hit that. Really, 3 workouts a week is the foundation. You can add from there as you go, and you will build endurance and stuff as you, I want to say, get in shape, but you get used to the workouts and get in your flow. But you do need a rest day as well. Cool. All right. So going into the workouts then, Barrett hit this. It's a 4-week cycle, and we rotate through classic strength week, Metcon week. And so in those different weeks, think of those as like the theme of the week or the focus for the week. So that week, we're going to have a classic, which is a mix of resistance training and cardio or HIIT training, like classic boot camp. That's why it's called classic, which is, I guess the name is kind of in the name or in the definition. So that's a classic week. So think like you're going to be moving stuff, you're going to be moving your body, resistance, using all the fun toys like the slam balls and the sandbags and the TRX and stuff. And your heart rate's definitely going to be up.
Those are my favorite weeks. The
classic weeks?
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
A little bit of everything.
I like it. And just remember, in that classic week, you're still going to have a Metcon day, and you're still going to have a strength day as well. And those pop in on usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays throughout the week. But classic week, I don't want to say is like a recovery week, but it is a little lighter in terms of the impact and like the kind of reps that we're going to put you under, or the load really, if it's a strength week. So it does allow you to have a little bit of it's not, I would say a recovery week, but it has a little lighter load than our strength week when we're loading you up heavy, or a Metcon week, which tends to just be a lot of impact. So that's the 4-week cycle as you go through, and then just knowing that there's going to be different days in those different weeks. Another question that comes up a lot is, should you plan your kind of week or your workouts to be like, hey, I'm going to come on this day for this day because I want to do strength day, or I'm going to only go on this day, and always, like, I wouldn't do that. Like, I would just plan it so that it fits best in your schedule. Every day you come in, you're going to get a great workout. It's going to be total body. And yes, we separate into pushes and pulls and different movement patterns and stuff like we said for rest, but you're always going to have some kind of upper and lower body, and you'll always have some kind of cardio or high intensity kind of effect, right? So your heart rate will get up. Even if it's a strength day, at least 12% of the exercises that you do in that workout,
12.5.
Yeah, 12.5% will be high max cardio. And a lot of times on those days, we'll do like a longer group finisher or something, so you do get to get like an endorphin dump too, and really get your heart rate up.
I'm going to stop you right there a second, because I just thought of a question that we get a lot at boot camp, and this is primarily from like our middle-aged women clients. They'll say, well, I'm reading that intense cardio is not good for me right now. Can you explain to our listeners why there's a difference between doing boot camp style cardio that is very short intervals and going out and running 5 miles on a whim? Can you explain why there is actually benefit in cardio in bursts like that in HIIT training?
Yeah, so this is HIIT training, which I guess maybe just talking about the two things I really want to stress. The benefit of our workouts, our programming, if you had to boil down, is really that we're doing resistance training or strength training, which is actually the number one thing for fat loss, right? To do resistance training, to build muscle and maintain lean muscle, especially if your goal is fat loss, which most of our clients is some kind of fat loss goal. So strength training. And then if you're in a caloric deficit, at least you aren't losing your muscle if you are. So that's number one, strength training. That is the number one way that you can actually lose fat, is build lean muscle so that your metabolism goes up. And it'll also help with your bone density, so as you age, osteoporosis. And then also just being able to do things and be strong and carry things and pick up your kids and go on hikes and stuff, right? So number one is that resistance training, strength training. And the second one is what you said, those bursts, those high intensity interval training. So the benefit of HIIT workouts specifically, and why it became such a thing for fat loss. And I don't like to look at it as like how many calories did you burn in that workout, because the benefit of what we're talking about is the strength training and then the HIIT workout, you actually burn calories beyond the workout, specifically with something called excess exercise post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC, right? Where your metabolism continues to fire at a higher level for up to like a day or two after a workout, if you really hit it hard. So the best way to like describe that, I would say, is if you go for a jog or a walk, like your heart rate's going to be up and you're going to be burning more calories at that time, like when your heart rate's up and you're walking or jogging. But then once you stop, like your heart rate comes back down and your body goes back to normal, right? So we create like a deficit or like a gap in energy that your body's basically playing catch up after an intense HIIT workout. So you work so hard in such a short amount of time. Again, the 30 minutes works really well for this as well. And so with these little intervals in these short bursts, your heart rate gets up so high, and we can talk about like what is the heart rate scale and where you want to be in terms of like a perceived exertion, like how hard do you want to go to get the effect of the HIIT. But then your metabolism is going to be going for up to like 24 to 36 hours after. So that's where the calories continue to burn. And so we bring it back to our client, our avatar, number one goal, fat loss. What are we programming for? Fat loss. So resistance training and HIIT workouts.
I love it. I love all the science behind it. You mentioned our avatar. I want you to talk about how, you know, when I first started boot camp, truthfully, you know, I was in my mid-20s. I was a fit person, thinking to myself, I don't need boot camp. I don't need someone telling me what to do. I go in there for my first session. I remember like there was, 35 seconds of burpees and then like mountain climbers. And I'm looking to my friend like, I'm dying, I can't do this all out for 30 seconds. And after I left, I was like, whew, that was a humbling experience. Here I thought I was super fit. And it really goes to show me, though, how the workouts can be challenging for anyone. And we can fit our workouts, we can make them so that all fitness levels will benefit from them. So can you talk to us about how, when you are programming, how are you keeping that in mind as you're doing your programming?
Yeah, for sure. So something I was thinking about and preparing for this, because it's all about programming today, but it's actually really hard to separate the programming itself from the delivery of the programming, which is the coaching, because that's really probably even more important. Because at the end of the day, the programming is really good and it works and the science is there and everything, but they're also just exercises on a piece of paper, and anyone could write them or go find them online or something, right? So it's very hard to separate like what we're talking about today, but none of it matters if you don't have a team of awesome coaches who can take that from a piece of paper and deliver it in a fire session for 30 minutes that leaves you wanting to come back and do it again, right? And part of that is where it comes to then adjusting the exercises and making it work for all levels. The programming itself, when we write it, I think we keep in mind our avatar. So we want to make sure that we're not deviating to program for anyone else. Even if you have some clients who are super athletic or want to have other goals in mind besides fat loss, or even if you have some people who are brand new and maybe have some injuries, limitations, anything they need to tone it down or reduce impact, we'll say, that's cool, but we just have to make sure that we're programming target for our avatar, right? Yeah. And then that's where the coaches come in, and when they crush it, and they do, is when they can adjust and help all those different levels in a wider spectrum of people working out. So the programming really does work. It's programmed to be designed to be able to kind of scale it up and down, but really we have a system, and the coaches are the ones who have to deliver that. So
yeah.
And one thing that I'll put at, and George, I love that answer, man, great. We program fundamental movement patterns, and that's what I want everyone to kind of think about. We're trying, of course, we're going to put you in positions that we're going to get resistance training, we're going to get all that stuff, but we want these movement patterns. We focus on that. That's the way that we time collapse the workout, going back to that 30 minutes. Like, we're not going to have a bodybuilder type workout where you're only hitting this part of the bicep or this part of the tricep. No, we want a movement pattern that mimics everyday life. And for example, the deadlift or the suitcase deadlift, it's like you're picking up groceries off the ground. Right. That's what you're going to do in life. Or you're picking a deadlift up, your child off the ground. Like, we want to program those style of movements that you can reinforce those movements over and over and over, because especially once you start picking up heavier loads, when your kid gets a little bigger,
that's right.
then all of a sudden, hey, you got to make sure you lift him or her the right way, right? So that's a big focus of ours when we look at that. So we're going to program those movement patterns for our avatar. And our avatar is Mrs. Jones, 40 years old, mother of 2. Like, that's what we're looking at. That's the lens that we tend to look at. And we can dial that up, and it goes back to George's point with coaches. We can dial that up or dial that down a little bit based on somebody's, movement ability or modalities for them specifically, or their injuries, or maybe some limitations that they have. And just because there's a limitation and we might adjust something, like, doesn't mean you're not going to get the same workout. We're still hitting those muscles that we're trying to get in a movement pattern. It recruits. When you start recruiting more muscles, like, those deadlifts, picking up, holding, you're going to recruit more muscles, which means you're going to burn more, not only during, but as George is talking about, the epoch, like after you're done working out. Like, we want to make sure that this workout counts for hours and hours and hours after you're done. Again, that's our time collapse that we're trying to do when we program those patterns in.
Yeah. I love, too, so much how, as a mom, and speaking to everyone else who is super busy, as we've already mentioned, how FitBody really preaches the fact that all you need is this 30 minutes a few times a week. It's going to fit into your lifestyle, and we're promoting longevity, and we don't want you to feel like you have to spend hours in the gym. We don't want this workout to feel like this impossible task that you can't stay consistent with. So that's what I love about it, is how we're practicing those healthy habits in a way that it's always going to fit into your lifestyle.
Totally. And the reality is, there is no end date to taking care of yourself. Like, it's not all of a sudden there is no there's no finish line in fitness.
Right.
The finish line is always going, because we just want to make sure that your life, as you age, and we like to look at, there's two types of aging. There's biological aging and there's lifestyle aging. We want to make sure that your lifestyle aging, because you're staying, working out these movement patterns, consistent, as George was hitting on, that it's not just going to stop once you get to your 50s. You're going to go throughout. So when you start getting older in life, you don't have these limitations or issues, or they're very minimal, because you've developed that great habit, because you're going to need those good habits when you get older too. And that's really, really important. And that's the same thing that we see a lot with fitness. And most of our clients are looking for a fat loss result. Once you get to the fat loss result, getting there isn't the important part. It's getting to the result and staying there. Right. And that goes back to the consistency that we're talking about. We want to get people to that result in a consistent manner that's sustainable. Yeah. Otherwise, the crash diet and this and that, nobody likes to do that.
Right.
So for us, it goes back to that consistency.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, you mentioned the fundamental movement patterns. And when FitBody started doing more, when you all stepped in and started really fine-tuning our program, that was one of the first things that I noticed, was some of the movements, how it really mimicked the movements I was doing in my everyday life. And I'm just going to put this out there. I think the biggest flex ever is being able to pick up your 55-pound child when they're acting up in the grocery store and take them out to the car. There is nothing better than being able to do that. And I hate it when I see coaches online programming a burpee, box jump, sprint, pull up. What's the benefit of that? There is no benefit of that. And so I love that FitBody focuses on those fundamental movement patterns in a way that we are going to see these patterns show up in our everyday life. And Mrs. Jones is going to be picking up her 3-year-old and saying, dang, these squats are paying off.
100%. And that's it. And, the ability to do that wasn't made in one trip to the gym.
Right.
It happens over and over and over and over. And I'll tell you, that's actually one of the biggest things that we hear just in general about. And sometimes it's well, we're doing these movement patterns, they're a little bit repetitive. And you're like, well, that's the point. That's the point. We right. want you to reinforce, because those movement patterns mimic the ones that you're doing in everyday life, so that when that instance comes, you're picking up somebody's stone going crazy.
Right.
It's nope, I got it. It's all good, right? Yeah. And that's important. So you will see some of the biggest movement patterns that we have, like deadlifts and push-ups and chest press and rows and things like that. Of course we're going to do them, because those are some of the biggest muscle groups you have. And if you want to burn the most, you got to recruit the most. And that's why we're doing this. And that's a big thing to think about. And I like to say, look at your bicep, and then look at your glute, or look at your quad, your thigh, and it's what's bigger?
Right.
What should you probably prioritize? The bigger muscle group, it's going to require more energy, which not only you're going to use it now, but you're going to use that in recovery. And that's a big thing that when we look at, and again, we will have some stuff that you're going to get used to doing, because we want to make sure that you get that movement pattern done correctly, and then you reinforce the movement pattern correctly, because otherwise, a bad habit, if you get a bad habit in your golf swing, your baseball swing, or whatever it is, you're going to reinforce that bad habit, and that's not what we want. So again, that's a big focus of coaching. Once we have it there, it's all right, now we have to refine and make sure you have this over and over and over, and that's the art of coaching. That's why I love it.
So you talked about the importance of using different muscle groups every day. Can you talk a little bit about rest days? Because when you, George, were talking about how, you'll have the upper pull, the lower push, and we change them around so that you're not working the same muscle groups every day. Sometimes what I hear from our clients is, what should my rest day be like? Should I just be sedentary that whole day? How many rest days should I take? And then also, is there a perfect time for working out, morning, evening? So that's kind of a twofold question.
I'll start with the timing, since that's that one, and George, I'll let you color in some details too. This is interesting. You hear it all the time. Work out in the morning, this and that, yada yada, or work out after work. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter when you do it. It matters that, number one, you're prepared for it, you're warm. And that's one big thing that with our clients, why we have that little countdown timer to get people going, get them loose. We want people, and that's why we have that dedicated warm-up while we're going through the explanation, because we want to get those muscles firing. Look, we're a little old now. Those muscles aren't as limber as they used to be.
Yeah.
So getting heat to those muscles is really important. But again, going back to what George mentioned earlier, it's about when can you fit it in your calendar that is going to be consistent over and over and over. And it's okay if you work out in the morning on this day, in the afternoon on this day, and this and that. Again, the exercise science and the actual movements that we're going to have, we're going to ensure that there's rest within that. One thing that I would really look at and just kind of, I wouldn't get in the habit of doing like a late afternoon session and then coming right away in the morning. If it happens, hey, every once in a while, that's okay. But you want to make sure that you're not overtraining, because if you do overtrain and you hit that and you don't allow for enough rest, your muscle fibers will actually break down over time rather than build up. And just one example that I would give, if you kind of look at the breaking down and longevity and kind of going back to the steady state cardio, if you look at a distance runner, like a marathoner, like what does their figure look like? It's usually lean and
thin,
but right? Look at a sprinter. What does a sprinter usually look like? You got a little muscle in there.
Right.
They do a different type of explosive dynamic training, kind of like what we're doing in HIIT, right? But they also have a different rest pattern that they're coming with. So going back to the timing, be consistent where it fits into your calendar. And again, if you anchor in 3 days a week, it's like every other day is the greatest recipe, because remember, our programming is designed with HIIT training, EPOC, like approximately 36 to 48 hours after you're done working out. That's when your body is finally, like, quote unquote, in that sweet spot, recovered. Well, then we're going to do it again. So if you give yourself a day off in between, that's consistent, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever works. And again, from a science that, the upper push, lower pull, lower push, as we switch that in, sprinkle in a Metcon day, which, will really be lighter from a resistance lever, but it's still designed to get into your heart rate. We're going to make sure to take care of the muscle groups as long as you're consistent.
Yeah.
And George, I'll let you color in some stuff about the specific days.
Well, yeah, I guess my question about rest days it's more for that client that you see coming 6 days a week, and they're just pushing themselves to the limit every single week, and you're reminding them, take a rest day, take a rest day. They're also the client that maybe is running 6 miles on Sunday, the day that we're closed. And you want them to understand that your muscles grow when you're resting, and you have to have adequate recovery. So can you talk to us about the science behind that?
Yeah, for sure. So keeping in mind what we talked about, what we are doing at boot camp, and if we're doing the boot camp workouts correctly, we are starting to really push ourselves as we get into it and as you kind of find your rhythm. And, you don't want to, it's really individual. Like if you're so sore that when you're first starting out, that's okay. That's why you do fewer workouts. As you go, you will get in that flow and you won't be as sore, and then you can come in an extra few days and stuff. So that's awesome. But remember, we're doing resistance training. We're doing strength training. We need to start pushing heavier weights, meaning we need to start challenging ourselves and trying to lift heavier. And we always are talking about, hey, lift like 8 to 10 rep max, or a weight that's really going to challenge you. So you should be sore and you should be putting your body like under load from that. And then on the other exercises that are higher cardio, you should be pushing. So a lot of times it comes into, there's a lot of touches or a lot of impacts just with your ankles and your feet and your knees and your back and stuff like that. So it really depends on the person. I would start with that for sure, because it's not like a one size fits all in terms of like what each person needs. But then if you're training 6 days a week at boot camp, that 7th day absolutely should be a rest day. You should not do anything high impact, meaning anything that's going to like jar your joints or your bones, like running, especially if you're running on like concrete or pavement or anything that's going to be very high impact and stressful. And so that would be considered like overtraining if you're doing that, right? So when I think of a rest day, it doesn't mean that you have to sit though. What I would do is, maybe some stretching, maybe some yoga if you want to actually be active. And then you can also look at non-exercise activity too. So like, are you active? Are you going to the park? Are you going for a bike ride with your kid or flying a kite or something, right? That's different than just literally vegging out and watching Netflix all day. So to me, like a rest day could still be like, hey, I'm moving, I'm active. An active rest day, yeah, for sure. And that would be awesome. And you probably actually feel better and recover better too for that. So if you are training 6 days a week, make that seventh day a rest day, and maybe just a little bit of active rest.
And I want to color in one thing about
Yeah.
this, and this is just something about that seventh day. And, you know, I played football growing up. We're fortunate we have a couple clients who used to play in the NFL with us. And so very, very, like, detailed, like, of course you get in, like, how do you train? Like, tell me all these
Right.
things.
You wanna know,
You want to
yeah.
know, you know, because as a kid, I'm like, oh my God, I remember watching you on TV and this
Yeah.
and that. And you get to find out, and you know, like, even when I was playing, you know, football in college, we had a day off. Like a day off where we were doing active recovery, going in the therapy room and that sort of stuff. But that continues in the NFL. And you think these are some of the most highly trained, highly invested people within their health and wellness and just physiological conditioning, whether it be strength or, you know, anything, and they have a rest day. I think we should probably have one too. So I just want to make sure our clients know, like, the best of the best of the best are having a rest day. You should be doing that too. And I know as you start getting in it, you know, working out can be addicting. It can be addictive, and you can want to be like, oh yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. But you can also overtrain. And anytime when someone's like, oh, I wish I would do, you know, a double workout, it's like, no, no, no. Instead of doing that second workout, why don't you invest that 30 minutes in your meal prep? Invest that, because that meal prep recovery, making sure you're getting the right protein in, because protein is what you need after that. It's not going to bulk you up, I promise.
Yeah.
You have to eat in a caloric surplus in order to get bulked up. We want to make sure that you're having enough lean protein so those muscle fibers are recovering, repairing when you do go to your rest. So that rest day is so critical. I just want to make sure that we hit that.
Yeah. And I think, too, you have to ask yourself and a client who may be in a situation like this, what are you actually chasing? And, you know, the NFL players that you mentioned, the reason why they're able to just work out those few days a week is because they're consistent with it. They are so consistent with their workout routine. They're likely taking that time to meal prep. They're about the lifestyle. It's not just about that time that they're spending at the gym. And I do believe that too many times you see clients that they start to see results, and they do get a little bit of that addictive behavior when it comes to exercise and all of the things. And so it just goes back, it boils back down to the lifestyle and what are you chasing here? Like, what's the end goal?
Totally. And, you know, again, there's no end date to
Right.
taking care of yourself.
Right.
So when you get to that point, you're like, oh man, I look so good. It's like, did you crash diet to get there?
Yep.
And if you did, that's the wrong way to go about it, because that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, so again, it's a long game. That's the game we're playing.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about the programming, about the workouts?
Oh, I think the one thing I really want to hit on personally is just the different days, specifically drilling down. And I know George, you know, kind of hit on that, classic being the one that is just the most, you know, classic as it is. You're going to have a mix of weight, a mix of movement patterns, a mix of cardio. We're going to get your heart going. That's the most, you know, frequently occurring day that we have. And I want our clients at home to think, when you're going into a classic day, the mindset, the frame that you should have is that weight should be moderate to a little bit on the heavier side. Moderate though, not going so heavy where you're going to have to stop. Because remember, when you're in a 35-second interval, you might be getting upwards to 15 to 20 reps because you're going nice and quick. You start getting up beyond 20 in that interval, you need to increase the weight a little bit, you know. But the same thing goes on the flip side, or I should say on the other side of the coin, when we get into a strength day. And this is one thing I really want to, you know, delineate between a strength day and a metabolic conditioning day or a Metcon day. You know, our strength days, when we program them in, they're designed for heavier loads. We want you, in those specific strength movements, we want you to pick up a heavier weight and challenge yourself. Typically 8 to 10 reps, depending on the interval time. We're usually going to have about 32 seconds, really up to 40 seconds on those intervals, because, hey, that's a time where it's going to be hard for you to pick it up. Usually those strength movements within the strength workout, because remember, just because it's a strength workout doesn't mean every exercise is a strength exercise. only about 50% of those movements are going to be strength. So if you have a 4-station workout, A, B at each station, you're really only going to see 3 to 4 exercises that are going to be strengths. And those exercises, that's when you're focusing in. I need to pick up heavier weight. I need to make sure that I do that. Because in those other, exercises, it's going to be a balance of, cardiovascular, some high dynamic and some low. Like we're going to have a little bit of a mix in there. Again, we're going to strategically still spike the heart rate, but we want to focus on hypertrophy, which is just a fancy way of saying getting deep into the muscle because we're picking up a heavier load, all right? That's what I want you to kind of think about. So from a client lens, that is so important because that's where you're going to challenge. And the deeper that muscle engagement, because what happens when you work out, that burning in the muscle, those are your muscle fibers breaking down, tearing. You get these microfiber tears in your muscles, and your body needs to repair them. That's where protein comes in. So when you go with a heavier load, it's going to be a deeper tear, which needs more time to recover. So we want to make sure that when you're doing that, like you pick up a heavier load in that strength exercise specifically. Now, turning the other side totally of the coin, the metabolic conditioning day. And I want, like clients, when you think metabolic conditioning, just think about you're going to be short of breath, your heart rate's going to be high.
Right.
Strength workout, you're going to be lower. You might not feel like you actually had a high heart rate type of exercise or type of day.
Which is okay.
Which is okay.
Some people think, like, I have to get my heart rate to 160.
And you don't in a strength day, because what's going to happen is you're actually going to burn way more calories in the recovery in your strength day. That EPOC is going to go through the roof, and that's why we want to put them in. But again, because it's a deeper tear, we can't program strength over and over and over. We have to kind of pull back a little bit. So that's why there's a blend throughout, even a strength week. Now, again, going back to that metabolic conditioning, you're going to be high heart rate. So from a client lens, like the weight that you pick up in your hands should be lower, like midline to lower, because I want you going. I want you going reps. Like, heart rate's going to be high. And again, just because it's a metabolic conditioning day doesn't mean every movement in there is going to be high, super, super high heart rate. Again, only about 40 to 50% of those movements are going to be, high heart rate. We're going to have some core work to let you recover. And on those types of days, traditionally, just the way that you function, you're going to have more explosive movements. They tend to be more anterior, front of the body. So you see a lot of chest stuff, a lot of quad or the front of your thighs, those sorts of muscle groups that are going to get engaged. So we want you to use, again, lighter weight, but we also want you to focus on, hey, I'm going to really challenge from a breath standpoint. This is conditioning. This is for your lungs. And again, because we have it in a HIIT style, that EPOC or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption is going to really carry. Not as much as a strength day, even though you're going to feel really accomplished and that sort of stuff. And we tend to get our clients to say, "Oh man, that was awesome on a Metcon day." Of course, because it's a high intensity, energy filled environment in that Metcon. But I just don't want clients to forget about that strength day. Real important. Again, for fat loss and overall just strength and conditioning.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that your heart rate is not going to get up as high on those days, because I can't tell you how many times I hear clients, get to the end of a strength workout and they're like, "Oh, I didn't even sweat today." I'm like, "That's okay."
It's okay.
But also, like, are you lifting heavy enough?
And
Because
there
when
it
I'm
is.
lifting pretty heavy, I'm sweating. My heart rate might not be up as high as a metabolic conditioning day.
Totally.
But I'm sweating lifting those weights.
Totally. And I can tell you, like for me personally, when I get into those workouts and I'm doing 10 reps, here's the thing. The first couple sets, you're not going to really feel it so much.
Right.
But when done correctly, when you get toward the end, the last 10 minutes, when you get to that strength movement, you're like, those lungs start to feel it, even in a strength day. And George kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. This is where some of that showmanship and the experience that we try and program too, because we know that the heart rate is going to be down during strength day. That's okay. But we like to program things in like finishers that maybe will have somebody finishing at a high heart rate, because it is an endorphin rush. It hits really, really quick. And of course, remember, going back to consistency, we need to make exercise and we need to make it an experience. It's not just a workout, it's an experience. So while we program and while we take care of the X's and O's, one of our big, focuses and goals is ensuring that we also give coaches the, interpersonal skills on how to coach and how to connect with clients, because that is so important for us. Because if you can really connect with the client, you can really look at Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones, and be like, I think you can give me one more.
Right.
And all of a sudden what happens? They
They'll
do
give
it,
you one
right? They'll
more,
give you
yeah.
one more. But that's important. As much as that programming is, that experiential stuff is as well. And George, I know you got a couple things to cover.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll wrap with just a few, maybe a little random, but some tips for how to get the most out of the workouts.
Yeah.
Barrett just hit a lot of good stuff that I wanted to make sure we hit, but making sure that you know that and you understand that. So it's almost like, what's the purpose of this workout? And then even what's the purpose of this exercise? So as a client, if you really, you're your best coach. Like no one else is going to care about you as much as you care about. So I think sometimes my tip or my advice is just take a little bit of ownership for the workout and the exercises and things that you're doing. And then if you need to ask your coach or ask them, hey, how do I do this? Or what's the point of this exercise? Or how heavy should I lift on this one? Take a little bit of ownership of that and really figure it out. One of my pet peeves is clients who are like, oh, I'm not counting. Like, I don't want to count my reps. I'm just going to like randomly do reps until the timer goes off or whatever. And that's fine. And like, we're there to help them and stuff. And we have the intervals and things. But like, if you really want to get the benefit of a strength exercise, you have to count to 10. It's not that high. And figure out like, hey, am I pushing myself? And then remember what weights you're using so that you know, hey, that 10 pound, that wasn't enough. I got 12 reps. So now I'm going to go to 15 pounds next time or whatever, increase the weight slightly. But this is just you being like a thoughtful workout and like a thoughtful student, right? And like taking ownership of your workout a little bit. And that's where it starts to get really magic, especially in a group setting where you have all different people, all different levels, coaches running around and doing a really good job of trying to help as many people as they can, but like you have to own that. So I would say count, really pay attention to like the weights that you are using. You could even take little notes and remember like what weight I used for some of the main movements like deadlifts and chest press and shoulder press and things like that. So you know, and you can push yourself and challenge yourself in that way when we do strength workouts. And same thing with the cardio exercises. So, hey, what's the purpose of this? If the purpose is to push your heart rate to a max cardio, which is that like 80+% of your max heart rate, right? Where you said like 160 beats per minute if you're looking at your watch or whatever, like you should be, hey, I need to get my heart rate up. Like, hey, I need to push, or hey, coach, like, what is the purpose of this one? Oh, heart rate. All right, let's go. Gas pedal, right? So it's really the clients who take ownership of that and start pushing themselves and just really being thoughtful. We could say like in the zone, but it's like, don't just go through the motions with the fundamental movement patterns, like really being in your body and like focused and thinking about where are my limbs, where are my joints, paying attention to the demos and the cues that the coaches are giving. Like these are all the things that are going to take that workout to the next level for you. So I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to get you the best result possible. And that's really it. So that's what I would do if I were a client working out at Fit Body. Be very intentional and very, very focused. And the cool thing about that too, which is like an awesome extra bonus of working out in this style of workout, is you will like lose track of time, you will blink, and then it'll be over, and you will not have thought about anything else from work or anything that's stressing you out at all, which is different than like going for a walk and just being like, all I'm thinking about is what's stressing me out right now, and now I'm just thinking about it more. And so if you're like, oh, my body and like the muscles and where is everything and the joints and in space and time and counting and like squeezing and like everything, like you're so in the moment that it's like, oh, it's over in like 30 minutes, you let a bunch of steam off and you got an awesome workout. And so that's what I got.
You can't think of anything. You honestly can't think of anything else when you're going through. And I think, George, that was gold, man. Like when you're performing, especially on a strength day, slow down your movement pattern. Make sure you have the mind to muscle connection. Where should I feel this? Listen to the coach go through your coaching cues. And I always say, hey, proud chest, belly button back to spine, heels stay flat on the ground. Really think about where you're having pressure, because the more that you can do that, the more you can feel the muscles engage when you're trying to get them to fire on the squat, the lunge, whatever movement pattern that you're actually doing. But slowing it down and thinking, that's golden, because at that point, You can't think of anything else. And all of a sudden, when you walk out of there, you're like, man, I feel great. Why? I haven't been thinking about any of the other pressures that I've had in my life outside because I've been thinking about this, which is that added benefit, added bonus.
Yeah. Well, guys, this was so great, and I love that you ended with those tips because even myself, I need that reminder sometimes. As someone who's been going to boot camp for over 7 years, it's like there are days where you want to show up and you just want to go through the motions, but then you get to the end of that workout and you're like, oh, what did I even do? Did I even try that hard today? And so it's great to have that reminder. And then also just, you know, our coaches are so wonderful at boot camp, and that's what they're there for. They're there to push our clients. They're there to push you outside of your comfort zone because it's supposed to feel uncomfortable for only 30 seconds though. And then, you know, then you can go about your comfortable life, but we want, you know, you to feel uncomfortable to see the results. So I love that you ended with that. Any other parting pieces of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with today?
Consistency. That's the biggest thing, consistency. Then you're not always going to feel like you want to work out. That's the truth.
Right.
I mean, I love working out. Not every day do I feel like I want to go work out, but I know that it's important. I know that afterwards, I've never performed a workout and then been like, man, I'm so mad I did that workout, right? But that's really important. Not every day you're going to feel like it, but you know, when you come, put it on your calendar. Like you're the CEO of your life. When it's on your calendar, bosses don't cancel. It's there. You'll make it happen, even if you don't feel like it. And I promise you, like our coaches, we're here and we're excited to see you. And just because you're tired, like that's okay. We're here to help, you know, come on in, because I promise you sometimes you're going to latch on to somebody's energy and all of a sudden you're going to raise your barometer. And I think that, you know, the biggest thing I always tell clients, once they come in, the hardest part was over. You came in. Like once you're in, you're golden. So that's a big thing. I would just say, hey, stay consistent, because the more that you do that, like it's going to flow into every other aspect of your life.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in for another episode of the Beyond the Scale podcast. Please make sure to check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify, and share this episode with all of your friends. Until next time, thanks so much.